This is a story about the American dream. No other decade defined America like the 1920s. The country was coming into its own and fulfilling its promise of freedom and prosperity. But already the dream was showing its cracks, and the decade that followed would test America to its very core. One book would serve as a prophetic warning to its audience and still offer a glimmer of hope about the American ideal.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet.
Automobiles, movies, and radio made our lives bigger. A consumer culture took root, and the cult of celebrity was born. F. Scott Fitzgerald and his wife Zelda became glamorous icons of the jazz age, embodying the raucous spirit of the roaring 20s. Fitzgerald was already a successful, highly paid writer, with 2 popular novels under his belt. The Great Gatsby would be his masterpiece, waited on by an eager public. Except it was a flop. The sales were terrible and the reviews were worse. Not only that, but tragedy lurked on the horizon. And like the stock market crash of 1929, the Fitzgeralds would crash and they would burn.
They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and then retreated back into their money and let other people clean up the mess they had made.
F. Scott Fitzgerald was born in 1896 in the Midwest, St. Paul, Minnesota. He was Irish-American at a time when that was still looked down on by the waspish elite. His father was a failed businessman, and Scott was always sensitive about his background. His wealthy aunt helped pay for his education, and at the Ivy League Princeton University, he was friends with the rich and the influential, which gave him access to an aristocratic lifestyle. But he didn't have the finances to support it.
Just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had.
Princeton was the ultimate representation of the East Coast establishment, and Fitzgerald very much wanted to belong to that. He became fixated with the social scene on campus to the detriment of his studies. He thrived as a member of a drama society, the Triangle Club, and his stories, articles and poems were often published in the Nassau Literary Magazine. He met his first love, the socialite Ginevra King, while at Princeton. He always fell for the golden girl, beautiful rich girls who were very progressive and modern. But she spurned him after her father supposedly said,
"Rich girls don't marry poor boys."
A heartbroken Fitzgerald was asked to leave Princeton during his junior year of college, and he joined the army in the hope of becoming a hero. It didn't take long for Fitzgerald to fall for another golden girl, Zelda Sayer, who he met at a country club dance while he was an officer stationed in Alabama. Scott proposed to the wild Southern belle Zelda, but she refused to marry him until he was financially successful. His first book, This Side of Paradise, was a portrait of American youth at the dawn of the Jazz Age, a term Fitzgerald coined. It was a sensation, and the author was an overnight success. He and Zelda married just a week after it was published. We could say that Jay Gatsby's story mirrors Fitzgerald's, a poor boy who falls in love with the golden girl and strives to succeed in order to win her hand.
This theme comes up again and again because I lived it.
Scholars debate over whether Daisy in The Great Gatsby is based on Ginevra or Zelda. But the truth is probably both. The two of them initially broke off their romance with Fitzgerald because he didn't have the capital to provide for them. But Zelda reconsidered when his first novel became an immediate bestseller. This female archetype shows up in many of his novels and short stories. Ultimately, the golden girl always falls short of the ideal, kind of like the American dream. It is young and beautiful, but lacking in substance and overly materialistic.
"Her voice is full of money," he said suddenly. That was it. I'd never understood before. It was full of money. That was the inexhaustible charm that rose and fell in it, the jingle of it, the cymbals' song of it.
Nick Carraway is the book's narrator. Jay Gatsby is the titular anti-hero. Daisy Buchanan is the elusive dream girl. Tom Buchanan is her despicable hulk of a philandering husband. And Jordan Baker, a somewhat corrupt golfer who is Daisy's childhood friend and briefly Nick's love interest. Myrtle Wilson is Tom's mistress who meets a gruesome end. And George Wilson is her cuckolded husband and Tom's opposite in every way.
Show me a hero and I'll write you a tragedy.
Jay Gatsby is seemingly the embodiment of the American dream, on the surface a rags-to-riches story. He is a man from a humble background who joins the army to find himself stationed in Louisville, Kentucky, where, like Fitzgerald himself, he encounters his golden girl, Daisy. Jay is sent to war, and Daisy promises to wait, but instead marries the very wealthy Tom Buchanan from a solid aristocratic family. 5 years later, and Gatsby, now mysteriously wealthy beyond imagination, has bought an ostentatious Hotel de Ville-style mansion opposite the Buchanans on Long Island, and in an age of jazz and prohibition, throws lavish parties to entice Daisy from across the bay, the social divide, and back into his world. Whether Daisy and Gatsby will get back together is the major plotline, and we are led to believe that there is a chance. In fact, we root for it. But in the end, we all know that Daisy will never leave Tom, and Gatsby will fail to achieve his version of the American dream. As far as Tom was concerned, Gatsby was just
Mr. Nobody from nowhere.
Fitzgerald began drafting The Great Gatsby in 1923 on Great Neck, Long Island, a peninsula that he calls West Egg in the book. As in real life, here lived the nouveau riche, the theatre people from New York, the newspaper owners, and the bootleggers like the extremely wealthy Jay Gatsby. Then across from West Egg, separated by a bay, is another peninsula, East Egg. And here we find the establishment, old money, the bankers, the lawyers, the idle rich, like Tom Buchanan and his wife Daisy, who live in a splendid Georgian mansion. Their boat dock has a green light on it, one of the most powerful symbols in the book, which can be seen flickering across the bay from Gatsby's mansion. Fitzgerald uses the physical setting as a metaphor for the class divisions between West Egg's nouveau riche and East Egg's established money. Gatsby is a short novel, less than 50,000 words, but not one single word is wasted. Fitzgerald set out to show the world that he, already a best-selling novelist, could write a work of art and infuse the jazz age with poetry.
I want to write something new.
He told his editor in the summer of 1922.
Something extraordinary and beautiful and simple and intricately patterned.
We often talk of Fitzgerald's poetic language, and with Gatsby, he was particularly inspired by John Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. Yet do not grieve, she cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. For ever wilt thou love, and she be fair. We can see the influence of John Keats on so much of Fitzgerald's prose.
A breeze blew through the room, blew curtains in at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up toward the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, and then rippled over the wine-colored rug, making a shadow on it, as wind does on the sea.
He freely admitted in a letter to his daughter that he had adapted a phrase from Keats' Ode to a Nightingale in Great Gatsby.
But there is no light, save from what heaven is, with the breezes blown,
is adapted by Fitzgerald as,
There was no light, save what the gleaming floor bounced in from the hall.
The title of his novel Tender as the Night is also a line from the same stanza by Keats. There is no dead language in the book, and although there are the famous phrases that everyone knows, there are also lesser-known, meticulously constructed phrases.
The lawn started at the beach and ran toward the front door for a quarter of a mile, jumping over sundials and brick walks and burning gardens.
Then we have the description of a woman as,
like an angry diamond,
or the movie star,
a gorgeous, scarcely human orchid of a woman.
While Fitzgerald was writing Gatsby, he was also reading Milton, Byron, and Shelley, and it is poetry that infuses Gatsby, that pushes the poetic capabilities of prose to the limits. Fitzgerald knew how to infuse colour into his writing. From Daisy's first appearance on her sofa in white, with its connotations of purity and innocence, to Gatsby's iconic pink suit and silver shirt and gold tie, colour dominates the page. We have blue gardens, yellow bugs, crimson rooms, the black tears of Daisy, gold turkeys, yellow cocktail music, and chauffeurs in uniforms of robin's egg blue. And shirts with stripes and scrolls and plaids in coral and apple green and lavender and faint orange, with monograms of Indian blue. Whereas Tom's blue coupe denotes his establishment credentials, the yellow of Gatsby's Rolls-Royce is associated with money, materialism, and its destructive nature, as when it later kills Myrtle. We get the fresh green breast of the New World, the blue eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, wine-coloured rugs, and of course, the famous green light across the bay.
Can't repeat the past? Why, of course you can.
Gatsby's relationship with time plays a major role in the plot. He wants to erase 5 years from not only his life, but from Daisy's as well. The novel has over 450 words connected with time, including 87 uses of the actual word time. In just the first few pages of Chapter 5, we have 2 o'clock, too late, all summer, day after tomorrow, moment, many hours, morning, 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock, an hour later, 4, 3:30, and then, when Gatsby reconnects with Daisy for the first time, he almost knocks a clock off the mantel.
Luckily, the clock took this moment to tilt dangerously at the pressure of his head, whereupon he turned and caught it with trembling fingers and set it back in place.
The suggestion is that unlike the physical clock, it is impossible to reset time.
I see now that this has been a story of the West. After all, Tom and Gatsby, Daisy and Jordan and I, we're all Westerners, and perhaps we possess some deficiency in common, which made us subtly unadaptable to Eastern life.
The main action of the book takes place in and around Long Island, New York. But the Midwest, where Fitzgerald was raised, and its core values saturate the book and act as a moral compass. The Midwest is the geographical heart of America and all it symbolizes, starting over the pioneering spirit, optimism, dreams, honesty, and even innocence. The East infects them all with its materialism and its attacks on traditional values. At the novel's end, the careless people, Tom and Daisy, head to Europe, even further east, while Nick, disgusted with the soulless immorality of the East, returns to the Midwest. The green light at the end of Daisy's dock may be the most debated symbol in American literature. It has been seen to simultaneously symbolize Gatsby's love for Daisy, money, and the American dream. At the end of the first chapter, Nick first sees Gatsby stretching out his arm towards Daisy's mansion across the bay.
I glanced seaward and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that might have been the end of a dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the unquiet darkness.
Later, Nick tragically realizes
the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever. Now it was again a green light on a dock.
To many, the green light symbolizes the American dream itself. It is elusive and hard to see through the mist of the bay. To others, it represents Gatsby's unwavering love for Daisy, also obscured by mists. Green is a symbol of hope, of spring, but also of money. The interpretations are endless. But what it may suggest is that the American dream's most undiscussed quality is its inaccessibility. Fitzgerald felt that the American dream had lost its way. It had been tarnished. Baseball, America's pastime and the purest of games, had been corrupted by the Black Sox game fixing of 1919. A real-life scandal mentioned in The Great Gatsby. Fitzgerald used it as an allegory of America. If baseball is corrupt, then we are really in trouble. Daisy, Gatsby's American dream, is shown to be superficial and materialistic as she is overwhelmed by his luxurious lifestyle and his extensive collections of English shirts.
"They're such beautiful shirts," she sobbed, her voice muffled in the thick folds. "It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before."
Gatsby himself is a contradiction of the American dream, a classic rags-to-riches story complicated by the fact that he made his money in bootlegging. Nothing about Gatsby is clear-cut. He is a romantic lead, but is a flashy and vulgar man, and even his later redemption, taking the rap for Myrtle Wilson's death, is ambiguous and tinged with criminality.
He's going to say he was driving. He swore he would.
Daisy is no better. In the end, it is her actions that lead to Myrtle's death, and her behaviour during and after the fatal car crash reinforces the selfishness that defines the period.
Whose side are you on, anyway?
Daisy really treats Gatsby no differently than Tom treats his mistress Myrtle. She never calls him and doesn't even attend his funeral, or even send flowers. Daisy sheds tears for shirts, but none for Gatsby. Tom and Daisy Buchanan survive and endure, and it's clear that the American dream only belongs to establishment figures like them, who had it from day one, who were born into it. Everyone's class is fixed, just like the World Series. An iconic symbol in the book are the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg on a fading billboard, a recurring motif which solidifies Fitzgerald's vision.
"God sees everything,"
repeated Wilson.
"That's an advertisement,"
Michael assured him. The eyes oversee much of the drama in the novel and could be seen as a representation of the eyes of God, except they are a faulted symbol, tied more to capitalism and consumerism than to any sense of morality. Fitzgerald is clear. What is important, family, friends and faith, has been corrupted. Money is now our God. And it ruined Gatsby. Although he had as much money as Tom, he doesn't have the right currency. The daisies of this world will always choose Tom. Fitzgerald captured the hopes and promises of the 1920s, but sensed that doom was on the horizon. He was right, and less than 5 years after Gatsby was published, the market would crash, as would his personal life. He once said,
Riding in a taxi one afternoon, between very tall buildings under a mauve and rosy sky, I began to bawl, because I had everything I wanted and knew I would never be so happy again.
Fitzgerald drank himself to death, and Zelda died 8 years later when a fire broke out in her asylum. Fitzgerald's final royalty check for The Great Gatsby was for just 7 copies sold in the first half of 1940. By the time he died, it had only sold 21,000 copies. Today, The Great Gatsby has sold over 30 million copies, and despite it being a failure when he died, he knew that it was his greatest work of art. It's all there in the final pages. Despite his fear that America is lost, he still offers hope.
Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow, we will run faster, stretch out our arms further, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past.